Hey, this is Chris with Hacking Your Leadership. On today's discussion on employee engagement, we're completing the topics that we've been discussing over the past several weeks on the kind of maybe lesser known or insidious causes of low employee engagement. Last week, we talked about not having enough transparency. The week before that, we talked about a lack of reward or recognition. There's all these different kind of areas that leaders can kind of dig into when it comes to why a person may or may not be engaged in their job or why there might be a change to the negative. On this last episode of the series, I want to talk about what happens when employees feel unheard. And I think it's fitting that it's the last one in the list because I think it's one that the employees, a lot of employees would articulate as a problem even if they don't do that unsolicited. Like if you have to ask them, but if you were to ask them, I think a lot of people would say that. It might not be something that they bring up on their own because just kind of the irony of the situation is that if a person is feeling unheard, they're less likely to want to speak up about that because they don't know that they'll be heard to begin with. And so you're less likely to hear from employees one-off that I don't feel like I'm being heard. Especially if the issue's been ongoing, for more than a few months, and the employee doesn't think anything can change or get solved. But what I want to go over when it comes to employees feeling unheard is if you look at what it means to feel heard, the priority or the kind of the predominant kind of feature of feeling heard in the context of business or whatever your work is you gave a suggestion or an idea on how to improve the business or to streamline a process or to remove a pain point or a roadblock on something, and the leadership team that you report to or your organization as a whole listened, implemented that, and now you have felt like you've contributed to the way the business runs going forward because you spoke up. That's what it means to feel heard by employees. It's not just, your leader sitting there like a therapist going, I can see how that would be hard. This is what it means where the rubber meets the road of feeling heard is the employees make a contribution with their own knowledge or experience, and that knowledge is put into implementation with behaviors or a change in the way things are done.
Yeah, I think it's such an important piece there. I think sometimes you can have conversation. I think about in my own leadership and my own conversations, like the important part of the implementation piece, the follow-up piece, the closing of the loop, the making sure that as you are having conversations, dialogue, ideation sessions, roundtables, town halls, whatever you might have, to talk to people about what's going on, how they're feeling, what about the work, what are their thoughts, what are their ideas, what are their feedback, what are their insights, whatever that might be, that you're doing something with it. You are taking action. You are validating the proper behaviors. You are, really making sure that they are not just a part of the work, but also understand and appreciate how that's informing the work. And I think, a lot of times this happens because it's like there's a big need. There's a big thing that we have to solve for. Hey, we're not good at this. We're having trouble with that. We're delayed behind this. We're getting stuck in this space. Like there's this big thing, and pull everybody together. Mm-hmm. Let's get an all team meeting, all hands meeting. Let's get everybody in together. Let's talk about this. What are we going to do? Thanks for your thoughts. Thanks for your ideas. Boom, let's go. And in the big, situations that can feel like, oh, we're doing a good job with this. That's not it for me. It's actually in the small ones. It's in the day-to-day. It's in the small tweaks. It's in some individual may have some insights or concerns about a specific thing, and you could write it off to say, oh, maybe it's just that person. Instead of saying, okay, you know what? Thank you for that. And I'm gonna go ask around. Let me see what's going on. Let me ask, and you start to ask a couple more people if they're experiencing the same type of thing. And then you could figure out, okay, maybe it is just that one person, or there is some element of this that's impacting more people. And then say, okay, now that I know that, let's then have some thoughts around what can we do to address it, and then including that person, letting them know, hey, you mentioned this to me. I want to let you know I followed up. I had some more conversations. This is a thing that more people are experiencing. So here's what I'm suggesting as far as something we can do. What are your thoughts on this?
Right.
And really making sure that you're doing that in the small day-to-day things, I think for me, those things are much more impactful and influential in making sure your team feels seen and heard, than some of the big things that have to happen where we then celebrate and rah, we had this issue and we had an idea and people gave some ideas and we used one of them. Isn't that awesome? Yeah, that is also awesome. And you need that. But for me, it's the smaller day-to-day things that are the more important ones.
Yeah, the like anything in life, the little things are the most important because they add up. I think what you're saying is spot on, and I want to go over some of the things that leaders can do to make sure this happens, and the causes of maybe why it doesn't happen in a lot of space. But first, let's get up to word from one of our sponsors. All right, if you're a leader of people and you're trying to influence this positively on your team, you have to start with the knowledge that the reason why it's easier to happen in the larger spaces, like Lorenzo was describing, is because those spaces are prescribed to you by your organization, and there's an agreed upon problem that needs to be solved from people in a leadership role. But the people who are executing may not be bought in that it's a problem to solve. Like, it's a problem that's been articulated to them. They have a responsibility to solve it. But if they don't actually see it as a problem, then they're not going to be as invested in coming up with a solution to it as you might be, the person who's in charge of leading the team as a whole. But when a person brings up something to you one-on-one, by definition, that means it's a pain point for them, or it's a problem that they see, or it's a problem that they want to try to solve. And they have kind of spearheaded the conversation because they want to make a contribution to the organization as a whole, but they also are trying to just solve a problem that they've experienced. And the buy-in for getting it fixed is far higher when you have both of those things at play as opposed to just one of them. And so it's important from a leadership perspective that you validate that. The reason why it's hard to validate that is because, let's be honest, a lot of these things that are brought to the attention of leaders by employees are not great ideas. All right. And let's be blunt about it. They're not great ideas. But why are they not great ideas? They're not great ideas because the person who brought the idea up to you doesn't have the knowledge or the context or a broader set of data available to them that would have allowed them to inform their own decision on the right way forward. So maybe it's got a seed or a kernel of a good idea in it, and it needs to go a different route or be kind of cooked for a while before it's good. Or it could be just a totally off base idea because of a lack of context or knowledge. The way to make sure that you are not spending your days combing through 100 bad ideas for one good one and allowing employees to kind of disengage in the process because they don't feel like they're being heard. The way to do this is to arm employees with the data they need to make sure that the things they're bringing up are better. It's to give them the transparency needed, to the information they need. It's to invite them into the conversation as much as you can when you're talking about the business, to not assume that because maybe this thing doesn't impact them, they don't need to know about it. No, let them in. If they're showing a thirst for that information at all, invite them into the conversation and have that with them. Arm them with the information, and they will self-select to not bring up things that are not good ideas that they may have brought up before. The number of times I can think back to ideas I brought up to leaders in my career where I look back and I cringe on it now, thinking, what was I thinking to bring that up? Well, in the moment, it seemed like a good idea. But it seemed like a good idea because I didn't know anything. And now that I do, I would have brought it up differently or not at all. So give your people the knowledge they need to make better decisions, and you will find over time the ideas get curated better for you, and you will have an easier time making your employees feel heard than feel like you're constantly saying, oh my gosh, how do I tell this person that their idea is, not good?
Yeah, it was making me laugh a little bit because I was thinking the same thing of like times in my career where I probably made comments, had an idea, suggested a strategy, and looking back on it, I was like, oh, that was just trash because I didn't have the perspective. Like I had no, right. Like I didn't know any better. And I was being driven by like kind of short-term thinking, immediate need, elements of emotion, probably pieces of ego, like so many things that are just like, this is my now, this is what I want to do, this is my thoughts on this, and not thinking, as you grow in your career with maturity, with larger, perspective and partnerships and things like that. I still have that same energy from time to time on certain things, but they're a lot more informed, and I take the time to make sure that my position is such that it makes sense and that I understand the larger approaches or strategies or reasons before that. I can still not like it. I can still have a different opinion. I can still have a different idea. But I think they're much more informed over time. So I love that you called that out, because I think it's not about eliminating the bad ideas. It's about creating a space for all ideas, and having that be something that people get used to, and then over time they will refine their ideas. And you can help them move faster if you take the time to walk through the idea, ask questions, be curious, provide insight or context, allow them the space to change their mind or adjust or think about things differently. But yeah, I think that it's way more important that you make sure that you have those spaces for people and for your teams, knowing and anticipating that there will be some bad ideas. Not out of bad intent, but just out of lack of perspective, understanding, experience, knowledge, that type of stuff.
Right. Well, it's the example that you gave where you said, the bad ideas that you cringe back on looking back on were rooted in a lot of other things. Like there was a little bit of ego in there. There was a lack of context, a lack of knowledge about the situation. But there's one thing you didn't mention that was also in there too, and that was a desire to improve things. So even with all of those things that you mentioned, if you didn't give a crap about the business, you still wouldn't have brought up the idea. Right? You also have to have with you a genuine care about how the business needs are, about the business needs, about how the outcomes are. You care about that. And it could be self-serving. You could care about the business outcomes because you're trying to get promoted. That's fine. But in general, you're making suggestions to try to make the business better. And the worst thing that you can do as a leader is be so preoccupied with making sure that you don't have to shoot down terrible ideas all the time, that you go the route of making employees feel unheard altogether, and then you stop getting the ideas. You stop getting the engagement from the employees to try to make the organization better. Because once you've lost that, it's almost impossible to get it back from an individual employee. You almost have to find a way to, cut bait and replace the team or replace the individual. The buy-in to getting it done is what needs to be preserved and protected. And the way to do that long term is to arm them with information and make sure that you give them the tools they need to refine their visions before they bring them to you. And then it will be far less detrimental when you can give more context, because it's not coming from a perspective of your idea is terrible. It's coming from a perspective of, wow, I love that you care about the business. That's a fantastic idea. I had the exact same thought in my mind last year, and someone told me this thing too. And I went, oh, I get it. Give them that information. Give it to them in advance. And you will make them more prepared to kind of refine their own experience and also feel heard. Thank you for joining us on this episode as we complete this series on little known or lesser known causes of a decline in employee engagement. We'll see you next Thursday for our next episode. You have a good day.